Around 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, a civilization emerged that would unite the galaxy for the first time. It survived hyperspace invasions, dark side purges, 1,000 years of nearly unbroken warfare, and at least 4 separate occasions when the Sith came within a single battle of total victory. It bent, cracked, and somehow, every single time, held together. Then, in the year we now call 0BBY, 30 rebel starfighters attacked a battle station over a jungle moon. The fight lasted under an hour. The station was destroyed. The franchise chose that afternoon as Year Zero. Every date in this video, every star cluster detonated, every planet drained, every civilization erased, gets time-stamped relative to one dogfight that involved fewer ships than a modern aircraft carrier carries planes. The audience that loves this material has already clocked the absurdity. Battles involving entire civilizations, weapons that detonated suns, wars that lasted a millennium. All of it measured backwards from Yavin 4. And for anyone who grew up with this lore, there's genuinely no excuse for the films not having touched any of it. This history is its own prosecutor. The evidence doesn't need a closing argument. So, 25,000 BBY, the beginning. The galaxy before the Republic wasn't blank space waiting to be organized. It was ancient. Civilizations had risen and collapsed on individual worlds across what would become Republic space for tens of thousands of years before any centralized government existed. Spacefaring species had been encountering each other across the hyperspace lanes for longer than the Republic would eventually last. What the Republic created around 25,000 BBY was a framework. Shared governance, shared law, a Senate that gave 100,000 worlds a voice in the same political structure. The Jedi Order emerged in the same era, codifying Force philosophy into an institution with rules, hierarchies, and a defined relationship to the Republic it would serve. 2 pillars, growing together. A civilization built by species who genuinely believed they were doing something permanent. They weren't wrong about the permanence. The Republic did last. It lasted an almost geological span of time, 25,000 years before a Sith Lord finally dismantled it from the inside. What the Founders couldn't have known, what the Republic would spend those 25 millennia repeatedly proving it couldn't retain, was a single lesson. Every time the dark side found purchase inside their civilization, the fallout was catastrophic, and the survivors forgot it happened. The cycle was already running by the time the Republic was 5 centuries old. In 24,500 BBY, roughly 500 years into the Republic's existence, a Jedi Knight named Zendor walked out of the Order with a grievance that was, at its core, philosophical. Zendor had approached the Jedi Council with a proposal: establish an academy where Force practitioners could study multiple traditions, including disciplines the Council classified as dangerous. The dark side, Zendor argued, wasn't inherently destructive. It was a dimension of the Force that deserved rigorous study rather than wholesale prohibition. The Council rejected the proposal. The disagreement wasn't resolved. Zendor left, took the rank of general, and established the Legionnaire Academy on the planet Leto for students who wanted to practice the traditions the Jedi had banned. What began as a philosophical disagreement became open warfare within years. Zendor's forces, the Legions of Leto, campaigned across multiple worlds. The war spread to Chandrila, Metalos, Brental IV, Coruscant, and Ossus, carrying the conflict across the breadth of early Republic space. It ended at the Battle of Columbus, where a Jedi Master named Adrista Pina, recorded in later histories as the Green Blade, killed Zendor. The Jedi then moved to Leto itself to eliminate the remaining Legionnaires. Those who survived escaped beyond Republic space. That last detail is the one that matters. The survivors escaped. The Republic declared victory. The Jedi had defeated the first armed dark side faction in Republic history. The war was over. The threat was eliminated. The remnants who had fled into the dark beyond the Republic's borders weren't pursued. There was no appetite for an open-ended campaign into unknown space, and the war had already been costly. The Republic was 5 centuries old and had its whole future ahead of it. By 24,500 BBY, the template exists. A faction of Force users breaks with established philosophy, arms, fights, loses, and the survivors vanish. The Republic wins, declares victory, and institutionally stops thinking about what just happened. The legions of Leto are now a historical footnote. The border between Republic space and the unknown is a line nobody watches. This moment, 24,500 BBY, is 24,500 years before the Battle of Yavin. The rebel fleet at Yavin was 30 ships. The calendar measuring this war starts from them. For the next 17,000 years, the Republic expanded. It fought internal conflicts. Coruscant and the planet Alsacan conducted 17 separate wars against each other across 3 millennia, a series of disputes so recurrent they became almost institutional, a background hum of political violence that the Republic absorbed and continued past. War was the background radiation of this civilization's history. Between the Alsacan conflicts and countless smaller engagements, the Republic was almost never fully at peace. None of those wars created what happened in 7000 BBY. Around that date, a group of Jedi fell to the dark side. The details of what broke them, what specific experiments, what dark side practices, what moment of no return, are partially lost to the distance of time. What is documented is the response. The Jedi Council exiled them. Rather than being destroyed, they were cast out, sent beyond Republic space with their lives, if not their standing. A dark Jedi exile named Sorza Sin had heard rumors of something called the Kingdom of Sith, a civilization of Force-sensitive beings somewhere beyond the known borders. Sin navigated the exile group toward those rumors, following them to a remote world called Korriban. What they found was a species. Red-skinned humanoids, the Sith species, primitive relative to Republic technology, but saturated with Force sensitivity to a degree almost unique in the galaxy. The exiles arrived with advanced technology, with Force techniques refined over generations of Jedi training, and with the accumulated resentment of people who had been cast out of the civilization they'd served. The Sith species saw beings who moved objects without touching them, who could do things that looked like sorcery. They didn't resist. The fusion that followed wasn't a conquest, it was an absorption. The Dark Jedi became lords. The Sith species became subjects. New traditions developed, blending Dark Jedi techniques with native Sith culture and Force practices that had evolved in isolation on Korriban for millennia. When a Sith Lord died, his servants were buried alive with him in his tomb. Korriban became a planet of tombs, a world where every valley was a monument to the hierarchy the exiles had built. Over the following centuries, this became the Sith Empire. The Republic, across those same centuries, had no idea it existed. The border between Republic space and the unknown had never been systematically watched. The exiles who had fled in 7000 BBY were a historical footnote from a war that had been won. The Dark Jedi were gone, defeated, exiled, problem solved. The Republic moved on. This is the original sin of institutional amnesia. The Dark Jedi who became the founders of the Sith Empire were handed their escape by the Republic's reluctance to pursue. 2,000 years passed. The Sith Empire grew, refined itself, built a military, and waited. Not strategically, not patiently in some conspiratorial sense, but simply because nobody on either side had any particular reason to go looking for the other. The Republic didn't know the Sith Empire existed. The Sith Empire knew the Republic existed, but had enough internal affairs to manage. Then, in 5000 BBY, a Dark Lord named Naga Sadow decided it was time. Sadow was, by the surviving accounts, a master of Sith alchemy, the dark side discipline that manipulated living things at a fundamental level, producing creatures and weapons the Republic had no frame of reference for. His invasion strategy relied on something the Republic had never encountered: Sith meditation spheres, specialized command vessels that amplified a Sith Lord's connection to the dark side, allowing him to direct battles across vast distances through the Force itself. His commanders weren't just receiving orders, they were extensions of Sadow's will, fighting through a shared dark side network. When the Great Hyperspace War began, the Republic was blindsided completely. An empire it hadn't known existed, with a military it hadn't anticipated, using command and control technology it couldn't counter, arrived in Republic space and began taking it apart. The conflict encompassed the entire Galactic Republic. At the Battle of Coruscant, the Republic capital was attacked directly. The city world held, but at heavy casualties, and primarily because Sadow's meditation sphere was damaged during the fighting, disrupting the dark side network that coordinated his forces. The defense of Coruscant was less a military triumph than a fortunate accident. The Republic survived the Great Hyperspace War by the narrowest of margins, a combination of Jedi heroism, Sadow's overextension, and the strategic blunder of an invasion that depended too heavily on one man's force connection to function. The Sith Empire was pushed back. The Sith species were driven nearly to extinction. Sadow himself fled into exile. The Republic rebuilt, and once again, it moved on. The specific fleet sizes of the Great Hyperspace War aren't preserved in surviving legend sources with precision. What is clear from the lore is the scope. A civilization the Republic hadn't known existed nearly conquered every world in the galaxy simultaneously. Its defeat left the Sith species as a remnant, Sadow in exile, and the Empire shattered. The Republic had survived something it hadn't prepared for, hadn't anticipated, and hadn't believed was possible. This is 5000 BBY, 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The rebel assault on the Death Star is as far from this moment as the fall of Rome is from today, and then 5 times further still. 3,000 years passed. The Republic rebuilt, expanded, stabilized. And then, around 3997 BBY, 2 fallen Jedi named Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma didn't discover the Sith. They resurrected them. Kun had been a Jedi scholar, driven, ambitious, drawn to ancient knowledge in ways his masters found concerning. His path to the dark side ran through Sith tombs and abandoned temples, through artifacts and holocrons left behind by Sith lords millennia dead. By the time he understood what had been done to him, he had already committed to it. Qel-Droma's fall was different. Political, operational, a Jedi who inserted himself into a conflict to stop it from the inside, and found the inside had its own gravity. By 3997 BBY, the two had established the Brotherhood of the Sith, and by 3996 BBY, they had set events in motion that would alter the physical structure of the galaxy. The Great Sith War's scope is documented in catastrophe rather than preserved ship counts. What is confirmed at Wikipedia-level sourcing, specifically, verifiably, with a high degree of confidence, is the Kron Cluster. The Kron Cluster was a group of 10 stars in the Oral Sector. Not one star, not a binary system, 10 stars. During the Battle of Kemplex 9 in 3996 BBY, a Krath sorceress named Alima Keto, operating under Exar Kun's command, wielding Sith power she didn't fully control, triggered all 10 simultaneously. 10 stars went supernova at once. The shockwave traveled outward from the Oral Sector and reached Ossus, the Jedi world that housed the Great Jedi Library, one of the largest repositories of Force knowledge in galactic history. The library had survived thousands of years of Republic history, accumulating records from civilizations some of which no longer existed. The supernova shockwave destroyed it. The ruins of what had been the Kron Cluster became known afterward as the Kron Drift, a dead zone of collapsed stellar remnants where 10 suns had burned for billions of years and were simply gone. Kun's use of Alima Keto wasn't strategically incidental. He had grown distrustful of her. She had been responsible for Ulic Qel-Droma's capture by Republic forces, a betrayal Kun neither forgot nor forgave. The records suggest Kun manipulated Keto into triggering the supernova, knowing the act would kill her. A superweapon strike and an assassination, executed simultaneously through a single action. The woman who triggered the end of 10 stars died in the shockwave of what she detonated. Kun himself didn't survive victory. The Republic and Jedi rallied. Qel-Droma, stripped of his force connection by the Jedi Master Nomi Sunrider, and consumed by remorse after killing his own brother Kay during the war, led the Republic's forces to Kuhn's location. That location was Yavin 4. Exar Kuhn's physical body was destroyed in the final engagement, his spirit trapped in his temple on the jungle moon, disembodied, frozen, unable to act. The Great Sith War ended in 3996 BBY. 10 stars gone. The Great Jedi Library gone. A Sith Lord's ghost haunting the jungle moon that future historians would designate as Year Zero of galactic time. This is 3996 BBY. The Battle of Yavin is nearly 4,000 years away. The event that names the calendar happened roughly 4,000 years after Alima Keto detonated a cluster of suns, and the calendar uses those two events on the same measuring stick. Somehow the Sith returned. Not a line of bewilderment from a film. The Republic's thesis statement for its own history. Every major catastrophe in the Legends timeline follows the same sequence. The Sith are defeated. The threat is declared over. Institutional memory of what almost happened erodes. And then the Sith return. The gaps between cycles are long enough for the generation that fought to die, and the generation that follows to treat the war as history rather than warning. The Mandalorian Wars, running from roughly 3976 to 3960 BBY, matter to this pattern not because the Mandalorians were Sith, but because of what they revealed about the Republic's institutional posture. The Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders launched a systematic campaign of conquest that moved world by world through the Outer Rim toward Republic space. The Republic's military responded, but defensively, ceding territory and watching civilizations burn while debating the appropriate level of engagement. The Jedi Council declined to commit Jedi forces. Their reasoning appears to have been that the conflict felt orchestrated, that something about the scale and direction of Mandalorian aggression didn't fit normal raiding patterns, and that deploying the Jedi Order into a war the Council didn't understand might accelerate something it couldn't yet see. A Jedi named Yavin didn't wait. He and Malak led a substantial portion of the Order into the war without Council approval, because watching civilizations be absorbed while the Republic deliberated was, to Yavin, unconscionable. He won. At Malachor V, the final battle ended with catastrophic destruction and Mandalorian defeat. Yavin personally hid Mandalore's mask, the symbolic object of Mandalorian leadership, ensuring the defeated Crusaders couldn't reconsolidate under a new Mandalore. But the war had carried Yavin to the edges of known space, and the edges of known space contained something. The specifics of what Yavin found near Malachor V, evidence of a Sith presence deeper in the unknown regions than the Republic had ever mapped, are established by the KOTOR-era lore through consequence rather than explicit documentation. What is fully documented is what came next. Yavin and Malak returned to Republic space as Sith Lords. By 3959 BBY, the Jedi Civil War had begun, and the Republic was in the worst possible position to fight it. The Republic military had spent 16 years bleeding through the Mandalorian Wars. Its fleet was damaged, its shipyards strained, its officer corps exhausted. Into this depleted Republic, Darth Yavin and Darth Malak brought a Sith fleet constructed using the Starforge, an ancient automated manufacturing platform of extraordinary scale, orbiting a star and drawing energy directly from it to produce capital ships and war materiel continuously. Wikipedia's Legends entry describes the Starforge's physical dimensions as extraordinary. Capital ships could move through the gaps between its radiating fins. It wasn't a factory that produced ships. It was a factory the size of a space station that produced fleets. The Starforge's specific production rate in ships per day figures isn't preserved in surviving Legends sources. What is documented is the outcome. The fleet it produced was large enough to bring the Republic's military to the verge of total collapse. World by world, the Republic lost ground to an empire it had trusted, led by heroes it had decorated, using technology it hadn't known existed. Malak's forces devastated Republic worlds systematically. The planet Telos was bombed from orbit. Dantooine, location of a Jedi enclave, was attacked. The Republic's military command faced the specific horror of fighting an enemy whose commanders knew exactly how the Republic fought, because those commanders had spent years fighting alongside the Republic before turning against it. The war ended through the most improbable mechanism in the cycle's history: Yavin himself. A Jedi strike team captured the Dark Lord. The Jedi Council used the Force to erase his memory of being a Sith Lord and reconstruct his personality, sending him back into the galaxy without the knowledge of who he'd been. The man who had built the Sith Empire then destroyed it, unknowingly, operating on manufactured loyalty to a republic whose fall he had engineered. The Jedi Civil War ended around 3956 BBY. The Republic had nearly died in approximately 3 years. One Sith Lord had come closer to total victory than Naga Sadow had 1,000 years earlier, using a weapon the Republic hadn't known was possible. And the Republic survived, not through systematic preparation, but through improvisation and the specific contingency of Yavin's captured mind. The galaxy had barely stabilized when the Sith Triumvirate arrived. Darth Traya, Darth Sion, and Darth Nihilus were the product of the Jedi Civil War's aftermath, Sith who had emerged from the chaos and the wounds the war left in the Force. Their strategy was surgical in a way Yavin and Malix had not been. Eliminate the Jedi first. Don't fight the Republic head-on while the Jedi still existed to counter Sith power. Remove the Jedi, and the Republic's military would be left without the one asset that had repeatedly turned the tide of every previous war. Around 3952 BBY, most of the surviving Jedi Masters gathered at a conclave on the planet Qatar. The Order had already been reduced by the Jedi Civil War. The Masters who assembled at Qatar represented the bulk of the Order's remaining institutional knowledge and leadership. They had come to discuss the Triumvirate threat, to coordinate a response, to begin rebuilding. Darth Nihilus arrived before the meeting began. Nihilus possessed a capability that had no precedent in documented Sith history, a unique variation of Force drain that operated at planetary scale. At Qatar, he stripped the Force from the planet's surface, consuming all life present. Every Jedi Master at the Conclave died. Almost every other living being on the planet died. Nihilus absorbed it all, not as a tactical decision, but as a feeding. He was, by this point in his existence, less a strategist than an appetite. The academic literature on this character describes him as a slave to hunger he couldn't control, a wound in the Force given humanoid shape, sustained by consumption in a way that was consuming him in return. The conclave at Qatar wasn't a battle, it was a harvest. The Jedi Order that had survived 17 schisms, 6,000 years of Sith conflicts, and the Jedi Civil War was reduced in a single encounter to something close to extinction. The number of Jedi who survived isn't recorded with precision in surviving legend sources. What the lore makes clear is that the Order was left a remnant, a handful of individuals where there had been thousands. The Republic survived the Sith Triumvirate through the actions of one Jedi, the Exile, who dismantled the Triumvirate piece by piece across KOTOR II's events. By 3951 BBY, the immediate threat was gone. The Order began rebuilding from near nothing, for the second time in less than a decade. 3.5 centuries later, around 3600 BBY, a reconstituted Sith Empire launched another galaxy-wide war against the Republic. The pattern had another full iteration. The Republic fought, the Jedi fought. The cycle continued. What the new Sith Wars represent, beginning around 2000 BBY, is the Republic running out of luck and time simultaneously. These weren't a single war. They were approximately 1,000 years of near-continuous Sith-Republic conflict, faction after faction, campaign after campaign, the Brotherhood of Darkness on one side and the Army of Light on the other, grinding across the galaxy for a span of time that equals twice the gap between ancient Rome and today. The Brotherhood of Darkness was the latest in the long line of Sith organizations that had threatened the Republic. But it had learned from its predecessors. It was larger, more coordinated, and had benefited from centuries of accumulated Sith knowledge. The Army of Light, Jedi-led and Republic-backed, fought it across world after world for a millennium. The conflict's scale in specific ship counts and casualty figures hasn't been fully preserved, but its duration alone makes it the longest sustained military conflict in Republic history. The final engagement came at Ruusan. The Brotherhood of Darkness and the Army of Light met for what both sides understood would be decisive. The Brotherhood deployed the Thought Bomb, a Sith superweapon that worked by detonating Force energy, trapping the souls of every Force user killed in its range, Jedi and Sith alike, in a void from which there was no release. Both sides were consumed. The Thought Bomb killed the Brotherhood of Darkness. It killed most of the Army of Light. The weapon ended the war by destroying everyone fighting it, both sides, except one. A Sith Lord named Darth Bane walked through the aftermath of Ruusan. He was the last surviving Sith in the galaxy. He looked at the wreckage of 1,000 years of Sith armies destroying themselves, losing not just to the Republic, but to their own internal conflicts, their own power struggles, their own inability to sustain organizational coherence, and arrived at a conclusion that would take another 1,000 years to prove correct. Sith armies were a structural failure. Too many Sith competing meant resources divided, plans undermined by rivals, knowledge hoarded rather than transmitted effectively. The old model had lost. Bane's answer was the rule of two: one master, one apprentice. The entire Sith Order would consist of exactly two people at any time, one to embody power, one to crave it. The apprentice's hunger would drive them to surpass the master. The succession would be unbroken, patient, operating in total secrecy. The Republic enacted the Ruusan reformations around 1000 BBY. With the Sith apparently extinct and 1,000 years of war finally over, the reforms restructured the Republic's military posture significantly. The Jedi Order took on the primary peacekeeping role, and the Republic's standing military capacity was reduced on the premise that the existential threat had been permanently eliminated. The institutional logic wasn't unreasonable. If the Sith were gone, the military infrastructure that had been fighting them for a millennium was less necessary. The Reformation was partly demilitarization and partly a restructuring designed to prevent any future military accumulation that could be turned toward conquest. What it created, over the following 1,000 years, was a republic that had forgotten what a Sith war felt like. Bane's chain of succession continued. One master, one apprentice, through every decade of the Republic's 1,000-year peace. The Jedi searched periodically. If the Sith had somehow survived, they would have detected something by now, they told themselves. They detected nothing, because there were never more than two, and two was too few for any systematic surveillance to register. By the time the Ruusan peace ended, everyone who had fought in the new Sith Wars had been dead for centuries. Their children had been dead for generations. The Republic that existed in 32 BBY had no living institutional memory of what a Sith army looked like. The Jedi Order had been a peacekeeping force for so long that the habits of large-scale warfare had become historical knowledge rather than operational practice. Bane's successor's successor's successor, the end of his chain, was ready. By 32 BBY, that end had a name: Palpatine. Elected Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic following the Trade Federation's blockade of Naboo, Palpatine occupied the Republic's most powerful democratic office. He was also, in secret, Darth Sidious, the current Sith Master, the latest link in Bane's unbroken chain, the culmination of a 1,000-year succession designed specifically for this moment. His plan was architecturally elegant in the way that only a plan with centuries of groundwork can be. The Republic had no standing army. The Ruusan reformations had seen to that. So Palpatine had arranged his own, years in advance. a clone army secretly commissioned from the planet Camino, the order placed through a Jedi Master named Sifo Dyas, who had been manipulated into requesting it. When Obi-Wan Kenobi later searched the Jedi archives for records of Camino, the system had been deleted, excised from the archive's records in a way that shouldn't have been possible, a gap that went uninvestigated for years before the investigation that mattered had already begun too late. The separatist crisis Palpatine engineered gave him the visible threat that justified deploying the clone army he'd secretly built. The Clone Wars, beginning in 22 BBY, spread across the galaxy over approximately 3 years. Palpatine directed both sides, Chancellor of the Republic in the Senate Chamber, Sith Master directing the separatist military through Count Dooku in the field. The war that appeared to be the Republic fighting the Separatists was actually Palpatine fighting Palpatine, bleeding both sides until the moment he chose to end it. Every previous Sith resurgence had come from outside the Republic, an empire beyond the borders, a hidden fleet, fallen Jedi building an army in unknown space. Palpatine's was different. He was the Republic. He had been sitting in the Senate for decades. The Jedi had been trying to detect Sith presence for 1,000 years and found nothing, because Bane's Rule of Two had ensured there was never enough Sith presence to detect. When the Jedi Council finally sensed something, when Mace Windu confronted Palpatine in his office, it was 19 BBY, and the trap had already closed. Order 66, issued that year, activated a behavioral modification embedded in every clone soldier's biology. Clone troopers across the galaxy turned on their Jedi generals simultaneously. The Jedi Order, which had survived Darth Nihilus's consumption of Qatar almost 4,000 years earlier, which had rebuilt from dozens to thousands across the Republic's long peace, which had been the galaxy's protectors through every iteration of the Sith cycle, was effectively destroyed in a matter of hours. The Republic that had existed for 25,000 years was reorganized into the Galactic Empire that same week. Palpatine stood before the Senate and declared it, and the Senate applauded. The Sith had finally won, not by invading from the borders, not by building an external empire, not by fielding an army the Republic could see and respond to, by being patient enough, for 1,000 years, to become the Republic. Now the calendar. The BBY/ABY dating system, before the Battle of Yavin, after the Battle of Yavin, was created, in Legends continuity, by the New Republic Historical Council around 25 ABY. Historians, sitting in the aftermath of the Galactic Civil War, chose to anchor galactic chronology to the moment the rebellion destroyed the first Death Star above Yavin 4. They had 25,000 years of history to anchor from. The Republic's founding in 25,000 BBY, the single most consequential date in the history of galactic civilization, the moment that created every institution, every law, every framework that defined the galaxy for millennia, isn't year zero. The Chron cluster supernova of 3,996 BBY, the moment 10 stars ceased to exist as stars, isn't year zero. Darth Bane's survival at Ruusan in 1000 BBY, the moment the Rule of Two was established, and the last 1,000 years of Sith strategy were set in motion, isn't year zero. Year zero is 30 rebel ships above a jungle moon. The assault force at Yavin consisted of 22 X-Wings and 8 Y-Wings, 30 total. The Death Star they destroyed carried approximately 2.4 million personnel, a staggering casualty count in absolute terms, a genuine turning point in the Galactic Civil War, a moment that mattered. The Battle of Yavin deserves its place in history. It proved the rebellion could win. It proved the Empire was vulnerable. It does not deserve to be the origin point of galactic time. But it's, and so every event in this video is officially measured from it. The first Great Schism, 24,500 years before those 30 ships. The Dark Jedi exile that created the Sith Empire, 7,000 years before. Naga Sadow's invasion of the entire Republic, 5,000 years before. The detonation of 10 stars in the Chron cluster, 3,996 years before. Darth Nihilus consuming Qatar, 3,952 years before. 1,000 continuous years of warfare, ending with the thought bomb at Ruusan, 1,000 years before. Darth Bane walking away from Ruusan with a plan that would take another millennium, 1,000 years before. All of it stamped in BBY. All of it anchored to one afternoon with 30 ships. The absurdity isn't that Yavin was unimportant. The absurdity is what the calendar is being asked to hold. The entire recorded history of a 25,000-year civilization, measured in units of years before the afternoon Luke Skywalker hit a 2-meter exhaust port. Every Sith resurgence, every near extinction of the Jedi, every star cluster detonated as a weapon, all of it on one ruler, with the tick mark at Yavin. And there is a final irony in the geography. Exar Kun's spirit was trapped after his defeat in a temple on Yavin 4, the moon that became Year Zero. A Sith Lord whose war destroyed 10 stars and the great Jedi library was frozen in the jungle of the moon that future historians would name their calendar from. The address of Year Zero was, for centuries, haunted by the ghost of a man who detonated a star cluster. In April 2014, Lucasfilm announced that the expanded universe, the novels, comics, games, and sourcebooks that had built this history over 4 decades, was being relabeled Star Wars Legends and designated non-canon. The new continuity wouldn't be bound by it. Future stories would start from different foundations. The scope of what was discontinued encompasses tens of millions of words. The entire KOTOR era, the Tales of the Jedi comics, where Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma existed, the Darth Bane novel trilogy, where the Rule of Two was established in full detail, the KOTOR 2 narrative, where Darth Nihilus consumed Qatar. The new Sith Wars, 1,000 years of documented conflict, became legends. The Ruusan Reformation and the institutional amnesia it represented, legends. 25,000 years of a civilization's documented cyclical tragedy, legends. What replaced it, in terms of deep ancient history, has been substantially thinner. The new canon has gestures toward ancient Sith, temples, artifacts, references, but the connected 25,000-year documented cycle of Republic amnesia and Sith resurgence hasn't been reconstructed in anything approaching the same depth. The machine that kept producing these histories, threading the same tragic pattern across millennia, was switched off. The Galactic Republic survived the Legions of Leto. It survived the founding of the Sith Empire on Korriban. It survived the Great Hyperspace War. It survived Exar Kun detonating 10 stars. It survived the Jedi Civil War and the Sith Triumvirate back to back. It survived 1,000 years of the new Sith Wars. It outlasted every Sith resurgence for 25 millennia. Whoever bought the franchise to continue that history chose to set it aside. They measured everything from Yavin, then built something smaller than what Yavin was measuring. If you want more of this, more deep Republic history, more of the ancient Sith cycles, more of the lore that built this universe, subscribe. There is considerably more where this came from.